I'm going to actually hit record and record this for the students at home. We're just talking for all of you at home about what a big day Tuesday was, the election of a new president and a new vice president, the first woman ever elected vice president of the United States. This is historic beyond belief. So we should spend some time. And you think, well, this is world history. Yeah, well, this impacts world history. All around the world, Angela Merkel, we talked about her, remember? Who many consider right now at this moment the leader of the free world. Well, she reached out to Joe Biden immediately. Who knows? He may become the leader of the free world again, as normally has been the tradition for American presidents. But they're already communicating. The Prime Minister of England, they're already communicating. Basically, the power of our government will transition to Joe Biden, the president-elect, on January 20th, 2021. That's the official transfer date for the peaceful transfer of power from one administration of government under Trump to a new administration of government under Joe Biden. And with him, you can see, is Kamala Harris. Both of these stories are absolutely intriguing. Maybe I'll tell a little bit about Joe Biden's story today, and then we'll talk more about Kamala maybe next time. But the world is waking up to a new world in terms of the United States now jumping back in and becoming a player on the world stage in things like climate change and the economy and the battle against the coronavirus. So it's really a big moment. Now, listen, our state is particularly split down the middle on who we supported. The country was split, but this was the biggest election ever in American history in 100 years. In 100 years. Everybody turned out, right? And Mr. Trump got more votes than anybody else has ever gotten for president until Mr. Biden beat him by about 4 million votes, maybe 5 by the time the counting's all finished. So Mr. Biden now, President-elect Biden, who will be the 46th president of the United States, got more votes than any single person in the history of the United States, ever. More than Barack Obama, even. And the people have spoken, and this is a democracy, and we should be very proud of our democracy. We had a near flawless election with the mail-in ballots. Here we are under COVID. Everybody questioning would people show up and vote? Yes, they did, but they kept their social distancing. Here's one of the counting centers. They have observers watching everything they do to make sure that that the vote count is accurate and that there's no cheating or shenanigans going on. And it really is the cleanest, least problem election ever because of all these extra precautions that we had to take. So it was a pretty cool moment. Now, currently, the counting isn't done yet in 4 states. So North Carolina is still counting. Mr. Trump is ahead there slightly. Biden's catching up, but probably not enough vote left to give him that state. However, in Georgia came as a huge surprise because this has been a Republican, red states for Republicans, blue states for Democrats, has been a red state forever and ever and ever. And it looks like it has now flipped and become a blue state. Biden currently leads by about 10,000 votes there, really close election, and they still have vote to count. But let's just assume that the leaders stay in the lead. So President Trump gets North Carolina, it's 15 electoral votes. Mr. Biden gets 16 electoral votes out of Georgia. Then it's Alaska. Alaska's going to vote for President Trump. There's 3 electoral votes there. And then Arizona has 10 or 11. I forget which. So 10 or 11. And right now, Biden is in the lead. It's narrowing, and they've still got 2% of the vote to count. So that'll be an exciting one to see what happens there. But if you just give those states to the person in the lead right now, Joe Biden won a decisive victory with 306 electoral votes is what it should turn out to be, or could turn out to be rather. And that's how many Mr. Trump got 4 years ago when he beat Hillary Clinton. So he said it was the biggest victory ever. Well, then Biden can say the same thing because it'll be probably the same number, or at least very close. It was a very decisive election too. One thing Mr. Trump never did was he never won the popular vote of the majority of people. He's now looking at 47.7. It isn't bad. They're pretty good actually, but that's not 50.06 or 50.6. That's a big win, by the way, in American politics. If you break 50%, often we have third candidates that takes part of the vote. So we've had 18 presidents win with less than 50% of the vote, right? So this is a really healthy lead by over 4 million. So a very decisive election. So now we can say with all confidence, President-elect Biden, Vice President Harris, and Biden is already preparing for the future. You guys, I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit right here because this election is huge, and I'm not going to comment on all the political stuff, but what will change immediately is a lot of the things that President Trump did to pull us off the world stage is now going to be erased. It's done with what we call presidential orders. And Biden's team already has written the presidential orders to erase Trump's presidential orders that took us out of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, which we actually negotiated with all the countries in the world. And then Mr. Trump pulled us out of that. So we're going back in. And we got a nice tweet from the mayor of Paris. She said, "Welcome back, America, to the climate change fight. Congratulations to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for their election. While we are about to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, this victory symbolizes our need to act together more than ever in view of the climate emergency." And so it was Obama and Biden. Biden was vice president under Obama, that negotiated this, and Trump erased it and said, "We're not going to play." Okay. Well, now we're going to go back into the agreement. Also, Mr. Trump pulled us out of the World Health Organization, which was, no one can understand why that would have happened in a pandemic, that we're not part of the world solution for the pandemic. There's some other things like he was going to build a wall and some other stuff that we don't have time to talk about here. But nevertheless, what we're saying is that this is a big moment. Okay, so now for Mr. Biden, he is 77. He'll be 78 years old when he takes the oath of office, by far the oldest president in American history. More so than Trump, who's in like 74 or so. The deal is, he saw Mr. Trump's, the way he conducts himself, whatever, as not the way it should be done. And so he came out of retirement to fight what he called a battle for the soul of America. This will be the 3rd time he ran for president and lost the first 2. He lost the first one right here in 88. He lost this one here in 08 against Obama. And then the primary, Obama got the nod. And then 2020, he finally is there. Now, listen, I want to jump ahead and let's see. Okay, tell you a little bit about Joseph R. Biden. Joseph R. Biden, right, was the youngest elected senator, I think, ever at the time. I think there's been a younger one since, but one of the very youngest from the state of Delaware back in 1972. Can you imagine how far back that was? I remember it very clearly, but wow. I mean, this was before your parents were born, okay? Now, he's been in the Senate ever since, but something happened after he won that election. He went to Washington, D.C. to kind of prepare his office and to prepare a place for his family to move to. And while he was there, his wife got into a car accident. It was horrible. They got T-boned, if you're familiar with that, by a truck. His wife was killed, his daughter was killed, and his 2 sons were thrown in the hospital in the emergency room. He rushed back to their side as quickly as possible, and he said, "I'm not going to be a senator. I got to stay with my boys. They need me." The senators, though, convinced him he needed to take the oath of office. So they actually flew up and gave him the oath of office there in the hospital and says, "You take your time, you take care of your family. When you get things figured out, come and join us in the Senate." All right, so he does, but he makes a promise to his boys that day: "I will be home every single night for you." And he literally traveled by train from Dover, Delaware to DC every morning, did his job, got on the train, came back every single day to be home with his boys at the home they knew as they were growing up. Years later, he meets Jill Biden. Their marriage is amazing. He loved his first wife dearly. He loves Jill dearly. They were able to raise the boys, and it's just an amazing story. And then his oldest son, Beau, who served in the military, went off to war after 9/11. He came back and was the Attorney General for the state of Delaware, a very high position, the same position that Kamala Harris had in California. They knew each other, but Beau Biden gets cancer and dies 5 years ago. Otherwise, maybe Biden runs for president, but he he was so torn with grief that he didn't run. Instead, he stayed home with his grieving family. And of course, Mr. Trump ran and won the election against Hillary Clinton. Well, the thing is, this man is so full of compassion. He is one of the kindest people in DC, and everyone says that, Democrat, Republican, whoever's worked with him, this guy will be the one. If you're struggling, he will be there and listening to you and helping you through. When he was a young boy, he stuttered. He had a very, very bad stutter, made fun of at school, all the kinds of stuff, that goes on. But his mom, they worked on it. They didn't have quite the professional people that we have today to help with those kinds of things. That we have, much better systems today to help people with stuttering. But he worked through it. You can still hear in the speech, you'll hear one point where he does go into a stutter, right? But everywhere he goes, if he runs into any young person who's got a stutter, he stops, talks with them, gives him his personal phone number and says, you call me and we'll talk and we'll work through this together. I mean, that's the kind of really awesome person Joe Biden is. And everybody says it, Democrats, Republicans, it's sincere. Probably the most actively religious president we've had since Jimmy Carter in the 1970s. He's a devoted Catholic, so he's the second Catholic ever elected. And it's interesting that we're going to be talking the next couple of days in Roman history about the rise of Christianity and the rise of the Roman Catholic Church. And he's part of that great religious tradition. So at any rate, this is a lot of information, I know, and you'll get to know more and more about Joe Biden as the next 4 years unfold. My guess is he'll only be president for 4 years and then he'll retire and leave it to Kamala Harris to run in 4 years. Maybe not. Maybe he's still full of energy and can run in his 80s. There's been other leaders who've worked through that age. But my guess is he wants to be, and here's what he said, a bridge to the future. And he ran his campaign as a campaign for the soul of America, to recapture, the way we thought about ourselves maybe a decade or so ago. And he won, and he won big. Now you notice in this speech, he doesn't say anything unkind or negative about his opponent. He basically says, I want to heal the country and unify the country. And that whole spirit, by the way, leaders around the world know him. He was vice president for 8 years. He was on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for 30. He knows every single world leader. They know him, and maybe he can help bring the world together a little bit more. So this would be like, we talked about some Roman emperors ascending to that position. But to my view, he kind of maps well, corresponds well with Marcus Aurelius, one of the 5 good emperors, the philosopher emperor. If you remember, we talked about him. I'll review that briefly for you later. But let's go ahead now and listen to the victory speech, which was last night. It was amazing. And let's go here and listen to the next president of the United States.
And it is now my great honor to introduce the President-elect of the United States of America.
Now, I want to stop right here. I want to stop right here in Kamala Harris, because notice she's wearing white. Why? Because it was 100 years ago, in 1920, that women first had the right to vote. And that was the color of the women who led what we call the suffragette movement, the fight to get women the right to vote. 100 years after that happened, she becomes the first vice president in American history. It's an amazing story, but we'll talk more about her next time. All right, but she gets to introduce the next president of the United States, President-elect Joe Biden. Here we go.
Biden.
And there he is, bounding onto the stage. Just a few weeks short of 78 years old, determined not to show it right now, feeling this moment. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., who will be the 46th president of the United States. Fist bump for these times. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, first brought together by Joe Biden's late son, Beau, who was Attorney General of Delaware. Kamala Harris served as Attorney General of California. They worked together. had a warm relationship, tested during the campaign, and she went on the attack during the first debate, but they overcame that. And tonight, she celebrates being the first woman vice president-elect of the United States.
Hello, my fellow Americans, and the people who brought me the dance, Delawareans. I see my buddy Senator Tom Carper down there, and I think Senator Coons is there, and I think the governor's around. And is that Ruth Ann? And that former Governor Ruth Ann Minner. Most importantly, my sisters-in-law, my sister Valerie. Anyway. Folks, the people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory, a convincing victory, a victory for we, the people. We've won with the most votes ever cast on a presidential ticket in the history of the nation. 74 million. What I must admit has surprised me. Tonight, we're seeing all over this nation, all cities and all parts of the country, indeed across the world, an outpouring of joy, of hope, renewed faith in tomorrow, bring a better day. And I'm humbled by the trust and confidence you've placed in me. I pledge to be a president who seeks not to divide, but unify. Who doesn't see red states and blue states, only sees the United States. And work with all my heart, with the confidence of the whole people, to win the confidence of all of you. And for that is what America, I believe, is about. It's about people. And that's what our administration will be all about. I sought this office to restore the soul of America, to rebuild the backbone of this nation, the middle class, and to make America respected around the world again. And to unite us here at home. It's the honor of my lifetime that so many millions of Americans have voted for that vision. And now the work of making that vision is real. It's a task, the task of our time. Folks, as I said many times before, I'm Jill's husband. And I would not be here without her love and tireless support of Jill and my son, Hunter, and Ashley, my daughter, and all our grandchildren, and their spouses, and all our family. They're my heart. Jill's a mom, a military mom, an educator. And she has dedicated her life to education. But teaching isn't just what she does, it's who she is. For American educators, this is a great day for y'all. You're going to have one of your own in the White House. And Jill's going to make a great first lady. I'm so proud of her. And I'll have the honor of serving with the fantastic vice president who you just heard from, Kamala Harris, who makes history as the first woman, first black woman, the first woman from South Asian descent, the first daughter of an immigrant ever elected in this country. Don't tell me it's not possible in the United States. It's long overdue. And we're reminded tonight of those who fought so hard for so many years to make this happen. Once again, America's bent the arc of the moral universe more toward justice. Kamala, Doug, like it or not, your family, you become an honorary Biden, there's no way out. To all those of you who volunteered and worked the polls in the middle of this pandemic, local elected officials, you deserve a special thanks from the entire nation. And to my campaign team and all the volunteers and all who gave so much of themselves to make this moment possible, I owe you. I owe you. I owe you everything. And to all those who supported us, I'm proud of the campaign we built and ran. I'm proud of the coalition we put together, the broadest and most diverse coalition in history. Democrats, Republicans, independents, progressives, moderates, conservatives, young, old, urban, suburban, rural, gay, straight, transgender, white, Latino, Asian, Native American. I mean it, especially those moments, and especially those moments where this campaign was at its lowest ebb. The African-American community stood up again for me. You've always had my back, and I'll have yours. I said at the outset, I wanted to represent this campaign to represent and look like America. We've done that. Now that's what I want the administration to look like and act like. For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself, but now let's give each other a chance. It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. And to make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans. They're Americans. The Bible tells us to everything there is a season, a time to build, a time to reap and a time to sow, and a time to heal. This is the time to heal in America. Now this campaign is over. What is the will of the people? What is our mandate? I believe it's this. Americans have called upon us to marshal the forces of decency, the forces of fairness, to marshal the forces of science and the forces of hope in the great battles of our time. The battle to control the virus, the battle to build prosperity, the battle to secure your family's health care, the battle to achieve racial justice and root out systemic racism in this country. And the battle to save our planet by getting climate under control. The battle to restore decency, defend democracy, and give everybody in this country a fair shot. That's all they're asking for, a fair shot. Folks, our work begins with getting COVID under control. We cannot repair the economy, restore our vitality, or relish life's most precious moments, hugging our grandchildren, our children, our birthdays, weddings, graduations, all the moments that matter most to us until we get it under control. On Monday, I will name a group of leading scientists and experts as transition advisors to help take the Biden-Harris COVID plan and convert it into an action blueprint that will start on January the 20th, 2021. That plan will be built on bedrock science. It will be constructed out of compassion, empathy, and concern. I will spare no effort, none, or any commitment to turn around this pandemic. Folks, I'm a proud Democrat, but I will govern as an American president. I'll work as hard for those who didn't vote for me as those who did. Let this grim era of demonization in America begin to end here and now. Refusal of Democrats and Republicans to cooperate with one another. It's not some mysterious force beyond our control. It's a decision, a choice we make. And if we can decide not to cooperate, then we can decide to cooperate. And I believe that this is part of the mandate given to us from the American people. They want us to cooperate in their interest. And that's the choice I'll make. And I'll call on Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, to make that choice with me. The American story is about slow yet steadily widening the opportunities in America. And make no mistake, too many dreams have been deferred for too long. We must make the promises of the country real for everybody, no matter their race, their ethnicity, their faith, their identity, or their disability. Folks, America has always been shaped by inflection points, by moments in time where we've made hard decisions about who we are and what we want to be. Lincoln in 1860, coming to save the Union. FDR in 1932, promising a beleaguered country a new deal. JFK in 1960, pledging a new frontier. And 12 years ago, when Barack Obama made history, he told us, yes, we can. Well, folks, we stand at an inflection point. We have an opportunity to defeat despair, to build a nation of prosperity and purpose. We can do it. I know we can. I've long talked about the battle for the soul of America. We must restore the soul of America. Our nation is shaped by the constant battle between our better angels and our darkest impulses. And what presidents say in this battle matters. It's time for our better angels to prevail. Tonight, the whole world is watching America. And I believe at our best, America is a beacon for the globe. We will not lead. We will lead not only by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. I've always believed, many of you heard me say it, I've always believed we can define America in one word: possibilities. That in America, everyone should be given an opportunity to go as far as their dreams and God-given ability will take them. You see, I believe in the possibilities of this country. We're always looking ahead to an America that's freer and more just, ahead to an America that creates jobs with dignity and respect, ahead of America that cures diseases like cancer and Alzheimer's, ahead to an America that never leaves anyone behind, ahead of America that never gives up, never gives in. This is a great nation. It's always been a bad bet to bet against America. We're good people. This is the United States of America. And there's never been anything we've been not able to do when we've done it together. Folks, in the last days of the campaign, I began thinking about a hymn that means a lot to me and my family, particularly my deceased son, Bo. It captures the faith that sustains me, which I believe sustains America. And I hope it can provide some comfort and solace to 230,000 Americans who've lost a loved one to this terrible virus this year. My heart goes out to each and every one of you. Hopefully this hymn gives you solace as well. It goes like this: and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, and make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. And now together, on eagle's wings, we embark on the work that God and history have called upon us to do, with full hearts and steady hands, with faith in America and in each other, with love of country, a thirst for justice. Let us be the nation that we know we can be, a nation united, a nation strengthened, a nation healed, the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, there's never been anything we've tried we've not been able to do. So remember, as my grandpapa, our grandpapa used to say when I walked out of his home when I was a kid up in Scranton, he said, Joey, keep the faith. And our grandmother, when she was alive, she yelled, no, Joey, spread it. Spread the faith. God love you all. May God bless America, and may God protect our church. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Right there, that is the 46th president of the United States to be, President-elect Joe Biden, and taking over the country at an extremely difficult moment. When it comes to difficult moments, this is one of the biggest. And we go back to Lincoln, when he had to bring the country back together as the Civil War started, in part as a result of his election. And that was a big deal, obviously bigger than this moment. But FDR facing down the Great Depression, that was a huge moment. And yet we did it. And then World War II, and that was a huge moment. And for you, this is an important moment too. And the Amendment 20 to the Constitution says that the president will take the oath of office on the 20th of January. Until then, President Trump is still president. This period, and this is not a disrespectful term, I want to be clear on this. This is a term we've used for a couple hundred years to just describe the feeling that one must have going from losing an election November 3rd and getting sworn in of the new president. That 3 months, it's about 75 days, is called historically, every time it happens, the lame duck period, where you really don't have that wing, if you will, in order to make things happen. So power is already transferring over to Joe Biden in the sense that people are looking to him for leadership, like they look to Lincoln, like they look to FDR. And basically the old president who lost kind of fades into the woodwork, just fades into the background. And everybody's focus is on January 20th. Now, Biden realizes that we're in trouble. In fact, he ran this campaign doing those rallies with the cars and things, so socially distanced, asking everybody to wear a mask so we didn't spread the virus more. And Utah, you guys all have phones. You got this message on your phones. The governor of Utah declared a state of emergency, requiring not just asking, requiring everyone to wear a mask, all businesses to support that, and canceling all student activities after school, sporting events, that kind of thing, practices, those all will end. They will let the state football championship continue only though if those athletes are tested, and there won't be fans in the stands or anything like that. So they'll let that finish, but only under carefully guided circumstances. And also too, with our college athletes, they're tested every week and have to, do certain things, certain ways, just like our professional athletes have to do. It's odd watching a football game with no fans in the stands, but that's what we have to do. This is your Pearl Harbor that started World War II. This is your 9/11. This will take more American lives than 9/11 ever did. And it right now, where does it rank? Well, Civil War is number 1, World War II is number 2, the Great Pandemic 100 years ago is number 3, and this is number 4 and catching up fast. So we've really got to put the brakes on this, and that means wearing masks, doing everything you're doing in class, all the stuff they're telling you to do, sitting apart, wiping everything down, being very careful. Be careful between classes. Keep your 6 feet apart. It really makes a difference. And what you're doing literally is trying to save lives. Young people, luckily, aren't as impacted, but just think about it. If I do what I need to do today as an American, as a Utahn, I can maybe save 10, 15 lives of people that I might accidentally get it, not know it, and spread it to older people who spread it to even older people. And that's who really gets impacted. So you're doing your part as an American citizen right now. Look at the numbers from Johns Hopkins as of last night. The United States is clean up here. The rest of the world, here's India, here's France, all these other countries, right, are doing so much better than we're doing. We need to get a handle on this. Now, Joe Biden then, and I'm not going to focus on anything the current president's doing. He's out playing golf. His coronavirus task force has not met in 3 weeks. But Joe Biden's did meet today. He's putting a new group together. The co-chair here's Vivek Murthy, who's taking charge here. He's the former US Surgeon General, very qualified. This guy right here ran the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. This is the group that has to test the vaccine to see if the vaccine's credible and we can distribute it to millions of people. Now, there's some good news on the vaccine front, but vaccines aren't 100%. You know that, right? You'll probably be wearing masks for the next year, year and a half. And this guy ran the FDA, and he's also from the University of California, San Francisco, which has one of the greatest medical centers in all of Northern California. So he's very qualified, and they're now going to start doing their part. Now, we want to talk about Kamala Harris a little bit. We'll do that next week. But if anything should happen to President-elect Biden, she then becomes the president. So that's the role of the vice president, and that's according to the 20th Amendment. Now, that's the kinds of things we're talking about in political science, and that just brings you up to speed. And I hope you enjoyed that. Again, it's not a political thing. This is just history unfolding, and it's a new chapter in our story as a country. And I think it's off to a great start. Now, I do want to do something really fast. I want to go to the map and see if any changes have happened to Georgia, Arizona, and if they've called those other states yet. Looks like they're not yet ready to. So next time I see you, maybe one of these states has turned either blue or red, and we can get our final count on who won the election and by how much. Okay, it's no doubt who won. We know who won, but it's just now by how much will they win. All right, well, let's get back to our Romans. And one of the things that we want to talk about is Roman construction. And you're going, really? After all that, you're going to talk about cement? Yeah, we're going to talk about cement here for the next little while. So yeah, let's get back into Roman history and start talking about the construction. The Great Forum, where the Senate would meet and where they'd have all these big debates and discussions. In Rome today, you can actually walk through the ruins of the old Forum. And now what's left are these amazingly immense columns. The thing is, the Greeks built beautiful architecture. The Romans took that and lifted it to the skies. It was so much bigger, so much grander, so much more dramatic and huge. And they were tremendous engineers. And they also had a problem with water. There was not enough water around Rome for everybody. So they literally, what they had to do was to build aqueducts. And these things are amazing feats of engineering. Some of them still work today. That were built, 1,500 to 2,000 years ago. And so this became the inspiration, I think, for, I got my grandson in here. He's doing some artwork right there, which is so exciting. So I guess if you guys can put up with those scratches, and that's what's happening in the background. He's more important than anything else. So we'll just let him play and have fun. But anyway, so let's talk more. Let's look at some more pictures. Here's a picture of the Forum of the ruins today, and they're gradually putting a lot of it back together. The problem with these ruins was that after Rome fell, it went from a city of almost 1 million people down to 30,000, 15,000 at one point. And people living around, when they were looking for building material for their homes or, their houses, they would steal from these sites, because to them, it wasn't like, wait a minute, this is a great historical resource and we need to preserve it. It was like, no, free stone. We don't have to cut it. The Romans did it, 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. So a lot of it's been hauled off, quite frankly. But it's amazing how many of these columns and things are still standing. And if you get to go to Rome, go up onto the Palatine Hill, start up there. Don't start the tour down with the Colosseum. Start the tour at the back end of it. You can get in line. There's hardly anybody in line. You get your ticket, you get in. If you start at the Colosseum, I can tell you, I'll show you a picture of this, the Colosseum here. I forgot one. I think I put one in here. Yeah. If you start there where everybody wants to start, the lines are insane. You'll be 45 minutes in line just before you even get in. But if you go up to the Palatine Hill and go to where Nero had his palace, there's no one there. There's just a guard that, you pay your little fee and you go through, and then you can go through all of this without having to stand in line. So that's just a little hint if you're in Rome. Rome is one of the greatest cities ever. I've been to a lot of the big cities, Paris, London, on, Beijing, Hong Kong, Tokyo, but Rome is my favorite. Because it's so ancient and the colors are amazing and the sky is so beautiful, and of course the ocean nearby. Here's what the Forum would have looked like. There's an artist drawing. Can you imagine? Wow, I wish it were still standing. They hadn't hauled it all away. The statues alone would have been amazing. A lot of those were destroyed by Christians later because they were pagan in origin, right? And so they wanted to get rid of paganism, right? Which it happened. But nevertheless, what a place. Now this is a place called Pompeii. And Pompeii is a city south of Rome that was, of course, Mount Vesuvius blew up and covered it in ash. And what happens here is all those people and everything, their whole lives were just frozen in time, literally. And so, wow, as they start to uncover this and peel this back, the things they're finding, it's amazing. Pompeii, great place to go for archaeology. Here's a good example of an aqueduct going over a canyon. Look at this construction. They took the arch, which was only invented in the classical period, and made it a feature. And what this does is, with all the weight of this structure, this arch takes the pressure and puts it out onto these columns. So you don't have to have a big solid wall to hold it up. You can have a column and then an arch, and the pressures, the weight is actually shifted this way. So it's an amazing architectural thing. At the top, of course, is a keystone, as you guys know, and putting these together and making this stand, right, with the mortar and things at the time, it was astounding. And that these are still standing all over Spain. You see them. Oh, you okay? Oh, all right. Oh, okay. A little slip there. But here's how this works. Here's the keystone, and these are the stones on the side. And you have the piers, they're called, and all the weight from this upper structure pushes straight down. Gravity dictates it has to go straight down, but the weight is shifted to the side. And you'll see these columns everywhere. The baths, they were big about building baths, and they had hot and cold baths, right? So they could jump back and forth, like cold bath, hot bath, or whatever. And they were more like gymnasiums with big pools. Of course, a lot of slaves were in labor building the fires and everything to keep the water warm under those that were that. So it's a slave society. Don't kid yourself. All of this was built with slave labor, but engineered by Romans. And you can still see so many of them still exist. And there were hundreds of these all over the city of Rome. And again, the arches are used to hold the ceilings up. And look at the ceilings, the archways. This is all stonework. The most amazing one, here's a road that still exists right there. Okay, that's the old Roman road that was built way back, and they keep pieces of it, intact for tourists. This by far is the most noted building in Rome. The Colosseum, where they did the gladiator contest. You can see the arches once again holding this massive structure. It's big. When you get in, it held about 65, 70,000 people. So it was on par with a modern football stadium, probably bigger than, say, BYU Stadium, but much bigger than the University of Utah Stadium. But with all in stone, and it had different entrances depending on your class. And coverings, awnings over the top. So on a hot day, you could sit in the shade. And this right here is the Pantheon. Now the Pantheon is where all of their gods were honored. And they did a roof, which was round with a hole in the top called the oculus, so it let light in, because the sun god was one of the gods they were worshiping by this time, and Apollo. And so you've got this, and this is all done with cement. It's such a heavy structure that what they did was they made a lot of little pots, little tiny pots, right? Just on their potter's wheel. But then they threw these in as air pockets so that it wouldn't be so heavy. And they did it all in cement. These guys mastered the use of cement. They were using cement. Well, we think cement started in the island of Crete way back in pre-Greek times. That the Macedonians used some as well. We see that in their history, but it was the Romans who took this invention of concrete. It wasn't the modern formula, which came out in England and France around the time our country was founded about 250 years ago, but it was very similar, called Roman concrete. And they were able to build all these buildings because they could use it as mortar and as foundational material. But this thing is so cool. I can't tell you. I remember first time I saw it, I was coming around this little bend right here. We were walking through town. Town's awesome. And we turned the corner and there it was. And it's just like, wow. I can't tell you how cool this is. Let's go on the inside. This is a drawing of what it would have looked like at the time with the gods all around in these niches around the side. So the floor is wide open. So you walk in, you have this huge space, this amazing vault, and you look up and it's all painted beautifully. And these columns are just unreal. Of course, they've been protected now for what, 1,500 years. The floor is insanely beautiful. Now, all of the statues of the pagan gods have been ripped out by the Christians. So darn it. Okay. Wish they were still there. But nevertheless, this oculus, as it's called, the light in is amazing. So when it rains, it's really cool. We were there on a rainy day and the rain does come through, but it only lands on a little spot about right here. Everywhere else is dry. And you can come in, get out of the rain, and yet you can still see the rain falling through and all that stuff. And then when the sun comes out, it's just a spectacular sight. This was built, I believe, in the reign of Titus, one of the good emperors, right? Okay, so yeah, if you're in Rome, oh my gosh, what an experience. It's called the Eternal City for a reason. Oh, and then there is the Vatican, which we're going to talk about separately, which is the home of the Roman Catholic Church, which is the church our new president belongs to, and he's a very devoted Catholic. He's probably, in terms of actually going to church and practicing his religion, probably the most religious president we've had since Jimmy Carter in the 1980s, who was a evangelical Christian who taught Sunday school while he was president of the United States. That's how devoted he was. So all presidents vary in terms of how they practice their religions. But these two, I think you look back on and say, yeah, these are the two most devoted in terms of attending church. And we're going to talk a lot about the Roman Catholic Church in the next few days. That's the next part of Roman history. So let's figure out how we get there. How do we get from a Roman pagan world to a Roman Christian world? Hence the word Roman Catholic Church. Okay. All right. Well, just to review, we had the Julio-Claudians with Caesar, Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero being that first generation of leaders after Caesar toppled the government and Augustus turned it into an empire. 48 BCE to 69, which is, almost 100 years. And then we move on to a period the next year after they got rid of Nero, 4 emperors in 1 year, each with an army, little civil war period here, not a good time, until Vespasian managed to end the war and set up the Flavian dynasty, which did much better. In fact, they were able to pick the good emperors, which went from 96 to 180. So once again, we're talking almost 100 years here. And of the great ones that were here, you'd have to say Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius were the 3 best. All of these were good emperors. There were 5 good emperors. And then this guy, Commodus, right back to Nero, right back to Caligula. Yeah, not a good one. He fancied himself. He'd go into the arena and they would set up, I'm talking about the gladiator contest. He was going to the forum, and not the forum, the Colosseum, and they would put up these animals and whatever and tie them down, or they had, certain gladiators, and he would literally fight in the arena, but it was always rigged. So he'd always win. He was a real pretender. Little Boots is his name, by the way. Commodus, Little Boots. It's too bad that it ended that way. So this is then the decline of the empire is going to come after Caligula, and Commodus. And then we have about 26 emperors in the next 100 years, 26. So that's not stability. In the United States, we have a president every 4 years, and we know how much we owe the Romans for our system of government and how it works, right? This instability, they just couldn't keep it under control, because guess what? Military generals with money who could buy their troops were the ones that were deciding what was going on. In one incident, the Praetorian Guard killed I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Commodus, but they actually held an auction. Here's the army holding an auction, and we're selling the empire to the highest Roman bidder. And one guy offered as much as a year's pay for every soldier in the Praetorian Guard to get the empire. But he died that year, so that didn't last long. What a terrible investment. I mean, it was falling apart, is what I'm saying. Very unstable. Now, the Goths were starting to invade. Other Germans were plundering parts of the empire. The empire was near collapse. And then Valerian is an emperor that goes out and decides to take on the old Persian Empire. It would have a different name back then, but it was basically the Persian Empire, what was left of it, a fragment of what it was, but still pretty powerful. And he gets defeated, and he becomes the first emperor in Roman history to be captured by his enemies. And he was treated terribly. If you look at this picture right here, here he is, Valerian, and he was used as a footstool for the Persian emperor to mount his horse, just treated in humiliating ways. I won't tell you all the stories because some of them are really bad. And some of them we don't even know they're true. We think there may be exaggerations by Christians during the Crusade period, which is about 1,000 years from now, in order to engender hostility toward Muslims. So it was fake news, we'd call it today, propaganda. But nevertheless, his army was captured and turned into slaves, and they basically put them on construction projects because they knew the Romans were great builders. But it was one of the great defeats of Roman history. What's going to turn it around? What's going to save the empire from total collapse? Well, it was the rise of Christianity. So I wanted to paint that picture of instability for you. And what's going to be the catalyst to keep it going longer? Religion. I remember I got chewed out once by a grandma. She said, came back to school, and I said, "You're teaching religion in class." I'm going, yeah, because like everybody in ancient times had a religion, and it drove what they do. It made things happen. If you don't teach a little bit about the history of the religion, you can't teach history. There's no such thing as history without understanding the rise of different religions. Like, how can you teach Egypt and not talk about mummification and the afterlife and Osiris and Isis? How can you teach history and not talk about the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? And you can't talk about the history of Rome unless you talk about paganism and Christianity too. Perfect place to stop. Boy, we couldn't have timed that any better. All right, you guys, have a great one.